The following video is an academically referenced comparison between two historical drama television shows. Tribus in written form, created by myself, Ben Krushkoff, using the phonetic spelling of my surname, between December 2013 and March 2016, and Britannia, with a new and final broadcast version created by Jez Butterworth, Tom Butterworth and James Richardson between April 2016 and some point in 2020, with the final season broadcast the following year. Britannia does have a named co-creator, Terry Caffela, who worked on the show between July 2013 and April 2016, but for reasons I'll explain elsewhere, it seems he left the creative team in April 2016, after which that show started again from scratch. This video uses copyright images from Sky UK Limited, each marked with the appropriate symbol, and does so following fair usage guidance from the Copyright Designs and Patents Act of 1988. Both shows were ultimately 3-season, 27-episode televisual dramas for the post-watershed market, which unto itself is pretty rare. According to an IMDb dataset, only around 1 in 1,000 televisual dramas had the same season and episode count by the time Tribus had been written and when Britannia went into production. Both are about the Celtic tribes, the Druids and the Roman invaders, and both were primarily set in the southeast of England during the Roman invasion of 43 AD. Again, this is important, as up until 2016 there had been no other multi-season dramas produced in the history of television set in the same time and place. Both shows have a central theme of the clash of civilizations and consider the advent of Christianity. Both have multiple narrative strands that were either entirely or almost entirely fictionalized. Both have a season 1 with 9 episodes, with a feature-length or extended first episode, which has a cold opening, scenes before the opening titles or main narrative, and all other episodes in both shows designed for the 60-minute slot. Both have narrative structures that incorporate folklore and myth dovetailed into their heavily fictionalized stories, as well as elements of slapstick. Both were written in the southwest of England, with an episode 1 script finished in 2016. Britannia started anew just after Tribus's had been completed. The plan for Tribus was to write the other season 1 scripts, based loosely on a treatment completed in 2014, and to sell and produce these in 2016, which is exactly what happened with Britannia. Likewise, I plan to write and produce the season 2 and 3 scripts for Tribus, also based loosely on the completed treatment, between 2017 and 2020, which is when I understand Britannia's seasons 2 and 3 were written and produced. And both were thought by an expert with links to Sky UK and Britannia's creator James Richardson to be a good fit for Sky Atlantic in 2016. Moving on to the comparison of the two shows' main narrative strands, which contain spoilers. The videos and screenshots are all from Britannia. The text at the bottom of the screen is the reference to where the same, or a highly similar thing, was described as happening in Tribus. The voiceover is a description of what is happening in both shows, along with some of the key differences. I'll focus on the respective arcs of the two young protagonists, whose journeys are at the heart of both dramas. In Tribus it's Cal, who's 13 at the start of the show. In Britannia it's Kate, who's around the same age. Cal is from the Catavalauni, or Cassi tribe, as I'd referred to them elsewhere. Kate is from the Canti. Both shows have a scene featuring prisoners in their respective cold openings, with several of their faces flickering in and out the flames. One of the prisoners is forced to step forward, to go on a journey with the show's main antagonist, but more about him later on. After the titles and cold openings, both of the young protagonists are introduced on their own. They look to the distance before running through fields towards their family. They're in a small Celtic settlement in the southeast of England whose name is written in subtitles. It's the eve of an important Celtic festival, which both are due to go to, seemingly for the first time, but there's an issue about their attendance, and they get support from an elder female relative. Ella in Tribus, Iselin in Britannia. Later on that night, a rite of passage gets underway for both youngsters at the festival site, with a group of other teens in a field next to a solitary standing barrel. Cal takes a sip from it, Kate dips her head into it. Cal proceeds to get drunk, whilst Kate gets high. And the young heroes wander around the festival sites in an inebriated state. There's manic drumming, scantily dressed dancers, people dance on or by hot coals, and someone plays with fire. At various stages at the festival site in episode 1, they both have an encounter with a mysterious-looking character holding a staff. Cal gets a tattoo, Kate gets her skin marked, and both have an issue with their name, a recurring theme throughout the two shows. However, the festival ends badly and neither make it back to their own bed. They do, however, make a new acquaintance in the first episode, someone who's been involved in stealing food. In Tribus, he's described as being banished. In Britannia, he's known as the outcast. The day after the festival, a wedding, specifically set in the borders of two tribal lands, takes place that will have major implications for the youngsters' tribes, even though neither is present. At both weddings, which were totally fictitious and are set in or by a tree circle, an ambush occurs when a group of riders appears from the surrounding forest and attacks the guests. The groom gets slaughtered, and the priestess gets killed by a Gaul. The bride, a beautiful niece of a tribal leader, survives and tries to escape, only to end up a captive of the Gaul. Later on, she'll get presented to the king of the Cassi in Tribus, or Canti in Britannia, who blames another tribe called the Regini or Regni for the ambush. It's a key inciting incident in both shows, which triggers a conflict between the Celtic tribes throughout their entirety. Meanwhile, and elsewhere, both young heroes are having a troubled start to their new friendship. After they chastise their new friend, the cast-out character heads off into some woods. But when the young protagonists follow in after him, they have an encounter with an antagonist and face grave danger. Their virginity seems to be at stake. However, the new friend surprisingly steps in and saves both. In Tribus, this scene actually involves the hero waking up as they were being dragged through the forest. He's been gagged and bound in rope. His assailant attempts to pull down his trousers, before the youngster surprisingly escapes and heads off through the trees, which, as you can see, all happened in Britannia, albeit featuring a different character. While all this has been happening, a wiry Celtic prisoner has set off on a journey in both, in a Roman prison wagon. He's deeply concerned about his missing children as they head out across the ancient British countryside. So remember, all of those things happen in the two shows' respective first episodes. It's the genesis of the two stories. Further similarities in the young heroes' narratives can be seen throughout the entirety of both Britannia and the Tribus portfolio, primarily in its treatment. The two youngsters start out as unfancied and uneducated when they're first introduced, but both become the subject of a prophecy. Cal will be the next great king, Kate the chosen one. A druid or an ex-druid helps raise them. Their order is portrayed as influential and powerful, and somewhat macabre. They collect human skulls. However, when the invasion happens in 43 AD, it takes everyone by surprise. The character leading the invasion is partly based on the real-life general, Aulus Plautius. He has a keen interest on learning about Celtic culture and the tribes, as well as the military conquest. During the initial stages of the invasion, the Romans murder an elder sibling of the young hero, Cal's older brother in Tribus, Kate's older sister in Britannia. Both protagonists then become motivated by rage. At various stages they get trained by a man, around 40 years old, learn a new language, and both get pursued by 3 canines, Cal by 3 dogs, Kate 3 wolves. The character partly based on Plautius later sets off on a mission to find them, which becomes the major driver of conflict in the two dramas. And knowing the influence the Druids are having, the general orders their annihilation. In both shows, the two heroes take part in a raid, or raids at night, Cal on Roman legionary camps, Kate on a legionary station. And both set out on a quest to lead the rebellion against the Romans, hoping to banish them from ancient Britannia once and for all. They receive the full backing of the Druids when doing so. Cal is part of a band of 7. Kate forms a band of 7, both made up of people from different tribes and backgrounds. And together with members of that alliance, they set out on a journey. They both have a discussion with an Irish character who refuses to join them, before they head to the west with their motley groups. Knowing they won't be able to beat the Romans on the open battlefield, both decide on a guerrilla-style plan of attack and lead a daring ambush on a Roman caravan, further frustrating the character based on Plautius, who is unable to stop or capture them. Together with members of their band and the support of one other tribe, both Cal and Kate have a final showdown with the Romans. At first, the rebels get the upper hand, as the Romans come under a hail of fire, but the occupying forces use their shields and counterattack, gaining the advantage. The two heroes seemingly get entrapped, but Cal escapes with a handful of allies, Kate escapes with 5 of hers, and even though they've both been injured, it looks like an old friend will help them evade capture. However, late at night and on the edge of town, that friend betrays them, and they're taken captive. An evocative folk song starts in both shows, with a woman singing in solo before being joined by a man in a duet, before both Cal and Kate get handed over to the character based on Plautius. The Roman general is elated to have finally captured his foe, the rebellion seemingly over. In the respective finales of the 27th and final episode of the two shows, Cal and Kate's journeys both reach their conclusion. They've been taken to their final destination, Rome, by the character based on Plautius. But when they arrive, neither shows sign of fear, and they walk with confidence and pride. The Eternal City is seen in all its grandeur, and a reference to Jesus is made. The clash of civilizations is over, a new religion has been born. The heroes might have lost the battle for Britannia, but both have survived. They can have faith in and spread the word of the Christian God from their new home. While there are a number of other similarities in terms of plot points and narratives that I won't go into in this video, before I wrap things up, I do think it's worth quickly looking at a list of similar characters in the two shows. Alongside Cal and Kate, both shows have a character referred to as Cara or Kera, the youngest member of their family who goes on to become the surprising heir to the tribal throne. There's a Verica and a Veron, an antagonist known for taking people's eyes. Paulius and Plautius, the Roman general, who's a bull of a man in both and loves his wine. He's supported by a subordinate in episode 1, Vespian or Vespasian. There's Ami in Tribus, Amina in Britannia, who both switch sides and join the Romans in season 1. A member of a Celtic royal family called Anwin or Anya. And characters called Brennus and Brenna are featured in Tribus, while there's 2 Brenners in Britannia. And both shows have supporting characters called Lucius and Brutus. Both also have a male lead character who can be described as being eccentric. In episode 1, he thinks he's starting out on a journey that will ultimately end in Rome. The eldest son of a Celtic king who's progressive thinking and overlooked. And both have the Celtic male prisoner, the head of the Druids, and an untrustworthy Gaul from the wedding, among others. And finally, for now at least, are the 2 wenches who appear at some point in both shows' first seasons. In both they try and lure a man out of a tent, with a promise of certain favours. Whilst I acknowledge that some of the aforementioned similarities come from creative choices that could easily have occurred by chance in 2 shows set in the same time and place, I believe that it's nearly impossible for them all to have occurred without one show heavily influencing the other. It's a view shared by a number of academics, experts, and members of the general public, as well as by artificial intelligence. And this doesn't take into account the links between the 2 sets of writers discussed elsewhere. I'd love to hear what you think. Please like, comment and share this video, and feel free to sign the petition linked to below on change.org. Cheers.